like to go ahead and get started, please? This is always the hardest part. Good morning. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you very much. So I just want to thank everyone for attending today. We have a great day in store for you. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a dramatic shift in our student demographics because of Free Community College. Obviously, COVID had a big impact, and just the demographics are changing. And, oh, I am sorry. Thank you for telling me that. Tess, can you give me a little help? Turn up that volume, please. Nope. All right, I'm just going to lean right in. How's this? All right, I'm going to see if I can move this and lean right in. All right. So I was just kind of giving you a shape of the landscape as to why we're here today. And I just want to share a few facts. These were helpful for me to put this all in perspective, that most of our students, approximately 70%, come here part-time. And the average age of our students is just under 28 years old. And 2/3 of our students are female. And almost 80% of our students take at least one online class. And approximately 50% of our students identify themselves as only online. So that's some huge shifts in the last 5 years, right? So some of those numbers, and I've been here a while, some of those numbers were pretty surprising for me. So those changes in demographics and modality shifts, along with the rises in technology such as AI, and the widening skills gap of our students' communication and technology skills, make serving these students very challenging. So we've built a program today with a keynote focus on AI, with supporting workshops and training geared towards best practices for supporting adult learners. Whether you're a faculty member, staff member supporting our students, or back of the house staff dedicated to keeping the Bristol engine running, we believe that there are sessions today that will help you expand your knowledge in areas that are relevant to your work. We've been diligently working on a program to expand our professional development day to provide everyone with information that is helpful to you no matter what your role is here at the college. And so we'll be ending the program today with a panel discussion with adult learners. They will share their experiences and answer questions to help us better understand their day-to-day challenges. We hope that you'll participate in this opportunity to understand their student perspectives. And before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to thank the AIPD staff as well as their cross-functional advisory team that provided important feedback throughout the whole planning process for today. So thank you very much. Today's program was developed through their collaboration and was used to drive the theme and workshop topics. I would also like to thank all the presenters in advance for their time and for their participation and sharing their knowledge with all of you. And now to start off your day, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Lance Eaton. Dr. Eaton is the Senior Associate Director of AI in Teaching and Learning at Northeastern University. His work engages with the possibility of digital tools for expanding teaching and learning communities while considering the various issues and questions that education technologies open up for our students, faculty, and higher ed. He has given talks, written about, and presented at conferences on artificial intelligence, tools in education, academic piracy, open access, OER, open pedagogy, and digital service learning. Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Lance Eaton. Thank you.
All right, just give me a minute to try not to break the computer and move forward. Okay, that's me. Now where are my notes? All right. bunch of noise. How's the sound? Thumbs up or throw things at me? Awesome. So yeah, I'm Lance Eaton. I'm super excited to be here for so many different reasons. One of which is I'm a product of community college. I graduated from North Shore Community College. Thank you, yes. It's where I first started teaching almost 20 years ago and still teach today. It's also where I first started doing a lot of the work that led to today. It's where I first started doing instructional design work and the like. And for me, community colleges are like, that's where my heart is. So I'm always happy to be back in these spaces with all the amazing people, faculty, staff, students, the community that sits at the heart of community colleges. So super excited to be here. I want to start off by 2 big points. One, I'm going to be talking all over the place about AI in different contexts. So like a lot of my work is about AI and teaching and learning, but it's also been thinking about policy and leadership and institutionally staff and how we look at and think about these tools, because it isn't just about the classroom, it's kind of across the board. Lots of things we're all trying to figure out with this new tidal wave of tools that like there's specific tools that we know about like ChatGPT, and then there's like AI just keeps showing up everywhere. Like there's there's an element of this that's like, for those that can recall, it's like Clippy on steroids. And that actually brings up, I hope, no laughs, so that means there's fewer people that remember Clippy, or it just wasn't funny. That's fine, either way, we're moving forward. It also, and that brings up another piece, is like, I'm here to talk about AI, I'm thinking about it, I literally have a job in it, and also like, just on the 30-minute drive here today, I had like 15 conflicting thoughts about it. So it's not that I'm a cheerleader, it is that these are a set of tools that require different types of thinking that we are now in the midst of having to figure out, because in many ways, like I think a paradigm frame is like, it's like the internet, like it's not necessarily going away, it's not necessarily a fad, and it's out there. And so how do we think about the ways it shows up and the ways that our students and we ourselves are using it? But I like to start with a very important question, which I like to call, what is generative AI, but wrong answers only. So who wants to go first? Always accurate. Thank you. What else? Go for it. It actually understands the concept that it's telling you about. Did I get that correctly? Produces only original thoughts. This is great. What else do we get? One more time. Up-to-date information. Unbiased, absolutely. For sure, whatever we can mean by that. Will eventually destroy us all. It is usually within like usually within the first 10 guesses, somebody goes right to Terminator, right? Way back there. Exemplifies admirable practices? Ethical practices. Ooh, right? Oh, it's true intelligence. It's great. One more time. Oh, it's great at drawing hands, all 19 fingers of them. We'll take one more. It's provided at no cost whatsoever. No financial cost, no environmental cost. Nope, it's just like air. Of course, I did the quintessential thing where I went to AI and asked it, what is AI? Wrong answers only. And it gave me this wonderful answer. Generative AI is a magical creature that lives inside your computer and makes all your dreams come true. It spends its days knitting digital sweaters and baking cookies for other programs. In its spare time, it enjoys composing symphonies for squirrels and painting abstract portraits of invisible friends. The primary function of generative AI is to serve as a professional online fortune teller, predicting whether you'll have spaghetti or tacos for dinner based on the alignment of your browser history. I mean, I will say those last sentence or two might be a little bit too on the nose, might actually not be a wrong answer, but you know. So I do want to start this with a particular message for educators, but really for all of us is, like, I don't want to bury this lead, and there's no magic bullet. That nothing I'm going to say, or probably anyone is going to say, is going to change the fact that generative AI is here and that it changes the game. And I will share ways of thinking differently or reframing some of our thoughts or our concerns, but there's no perfect solution out there. So, you know, if you want to just be like, get up and leave right now, I will totally give you those 10 seconds to do it, and I won't judge you until you're out the door. The other piece of this is that, and this is something I have grappled with myself as an educator over the years, is that we're never going to build a better mousetrap. And what I mean by that is, I mean, I've spent way too much of my time trying to catch students. And I've had those proud moments, like those, not proud of now, but proud moments where I was just like, I'd step into the class and be like, guess what? Last semester, I caught a student plagiarizing just based on one word. Do you want to try it in my class, right? Like, I've tried those approaches. Those are horrible. And what I mean by that is, like, they don't make me feel good. They don't make the students feel good. They don't build trust. They don't do the things that we talk about when we want to build learning that is meaningful, that's transformative, that's inclusive, dare I say that word these days. So I just want us to understand, like, this is what we mean by changing the game. Trying to catch students is just, like, that's the path of madness. And if you want to take that journey, go forth. But again, you're welcome to step out, because I don't think we can really do that. Not if we are also trying to recognize the challenges of being a student, right? How many adult students we have, how many students who are coming to college with needs and demands, not just in the classroom, but like from the world at large, from a world that is often hostile to them. And that makes the classroom so much harder than maybe what we imagined it used to be. But just trying to catch students isn't the place. I think it's also, you know, as I said, I have criticisms about generative AI. And I have concerns. Like, we should all have concerns about it. This isn't a, like, look at it blindly. But I've been doing this work long enough that I also have a frame of mind that helps me feel a little situated to still, like, push into it. So I have up here on this slide a list of different issues that people have properly raised that are deep concerns about generative AI. Things like the credibility, reliability, quality, bias, copyright, creativity. I'm not going to read the whole list, but you get the sense of, like, what those are. Does this feel like a pretty good, solid list about the concerns around generative AI? Show of hands. Anybody feeling like there's something they're thinking about that doesn't really fit into these 10 categories? Labor and jobs. Okay, that's fair. I might see I think that's a good one I probably need to add. I do want to note, though, that this list of issues isn't actually a list I composed for generative AI. This is a list of issues that people had about Wikipedia. Anybody remember the Wikipedia wars? Anybody still fighting the Wikipedia wars? We've changed our minds about what Wikipedia is, right? We saw it and had it as a threat. You know, we saw it as, like, this is going to undermine the entirety of education or society in all these ways. And of course, Mark Twain supposedly said, I read it on Wikipedia, so bear with me, that history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. Because this actually, again, that list I provided isn't a list of Wikipedia concerns, but it's a list of concerns about the internet itself, right? So many of those issues that we are concerned about, and rightfully concerned about, are issues that I would call perpetual problems. I wouldn't call it, that's a term that's out there. That these are the perpetual problems and challenges of education in the modern industrialized world. Many of them were there obviously before the industrialized world. But I just use this as a lens, as a way of getting us to think about, this question of what are we really concerned about when it comes to AI? Is it something new, or is it something that is just something we're always worried about, we're always trying to figure out? And so if we're trying to figure out what that new thing is, I think this quote is a rather interesting discussion of that. Rather than fostering deep understanding and critical thinking, this tool promotes a passive reliance on external work, leading to a kind of intellectual forgetfulness. Learners will disengage from the active process of constructing knowledge, placing their trust in external sources rather than developing the internal capacity to think critically and independently. Instead of empowering learners to cultivate authentic wisdom, this method merely offers the semblance of knowledge. It allows them to accumulate information without truly understanding it, perpetuating superficial learning. This, in turn, risks creating learners who believe they know much but lack critical depth to meaningfully engage in the world, with the world, leading to intellectual arrogance and detachment from true wisdom and transformation. How many people feel like this gets you about where you're feeling about generative AI? Okay. All right. This was a quote that was reformatted with AI, and it comes from this quote. And I'm going to read this quote, and you can just kind of hear it, and we're going to talk about where this is from. In fact, it will introduce forgetfulness into the soul of those who learned it. They will not practice using their memory because they will put their trust in writing, which is external and depends on signs that belong to others, instead of trying to remember from the inside completely on their own. You have not discovered a potion for remembering, but for reminding. You provide your students with the appearance of wisdom, not with its reality. Your invention will enable them to hear many things without being properly taught, and they will imagine that they have come to know much, while for the most part they will know nothing. And they will be difficult to get along with, since they will merely appear to be wise instead of really being so. Any guess on where this quote is from? Socrates, right? About writing, right? So much of what we are concerned about, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned about, are things we have literally for millennia been worried about. Socrates is like, man, I don't know about this writing stuff. It's a little if, right? It's a little meh. There is a long legacy of this. And the term that this is often, or more recently has been described as, is technopanics. And we live in an age of technopanics, right? A technopanic refers to an intense public, political, and academic response to the emergence or use of media or technologies, especially by the young. And that technopanic is simply a moral panic centered on societal fears about a particular contemporary technology or technological method or activity, instead of merely the content flowing over the technology or medium. I've been dealing with technopanics all my life. Video games were gonna make me violent. I mean, I was ready with Mike Tyson's Punch-Out to really get into it, but I can't throw a punch. I wouldn't want to. I'd rather have some coffee. Speaking of which, I need to. Right? It did help me with better hand-eye coordination when I started driving. I was told the internet was making me stupider, but it also made me a lot more aware of other people's ideas, their pain, and their circumstances. When we're hit with a technology, there are ways that in academia we get really critical, and this is important, and that we need this. But there's also sometimes it goes to the point of what I would say beyond the pale. Like, we can get to the point where we will say, like, over my dead body. And I think there's a challenge there. There's a concern there, right? That it's not just AI or Wikipedia or the internet that we've been worrying about our technology. It's the fact that, like, we've been worrying about this, as I said, for millennia, and certainly over the last 200 years, right? Television was rotting our brains. Comic books were going to turn us into juvenile delinquents. The radio, this disembodied voice coming into your living room, was going to drive us mad. Like, these are all criticisms that were coming out. Novels were causing people, particularly women, to have problematic thoughts, right? Right? And some of you are like, they still are. As they should be, right? So, you know, it's enough to wonder, like, if our ancestors made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place. And if you recognize that quote, then you're going to really love this next one, which is from my favorite author, one of my favorite authors, Douglas Adams. He has this quote about technology that I just keep thinking about. Anything that is in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary, and it's just the natural part of the way the world works. Anything that's invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. And 3, anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. I'm not going to make judgments about who's clapping about that last one, but I'm not going to judgments about age, to be clear. So I find it a grounding quote, and I'm 10 years past that 35-year-old threshold, and I don't want to be number 3. And somehow, and I don't like number 1 or 2, but I've somehow found myself in number 2. I have somehow ended up in a career in AI and in teaching and learning. But I do think we have to reconcile with the challenges of change that these tools represent. And the thing is that this shows me more than ever that, you know, technology is a perpetual problem. It's not a solvable one. And for me, you know, this idea of technology as an ongoing negotiation and navigation, as I've come to that, I've felt more grounded because it's made me have to actually not just think about myself, not just worry about my own relationship, but really build relationships with others in figuring it out. And this is something I'm going to encourage throughout the rest of this talk is, like, we figure out these tools in communities. So much of, like, how I am here today and have gone and given, you know, more than 50 talks at different colleges and conferences and whatnot over the last 2 years isn't because of just me, but it's because I'm continually in conversations with other people making sense of these tools, making sense of their problems and also their possibilities. So I just want to kind of help us continue to think about that idea of, like, how do we look at this and not, like, well, we will have visceral reactions, but move past that to engage with one another. Because one of the most challenging things about this tool is that it's a tool that requires lots of different ways of human thinking to understand how to use it, how to get the most out of it, and how to do this well. And I think that's the thing we're going to be continuing to have a conversation with for the next, I don't know how many years. Okay. But let's talk about these tools, right? A little bit more into these tools. Here's a list of tools. I'm going to just call them out, and as I do, just raise your hand if you've heard of it. ChatGPT, right? Nearly almost everyone. Claude, okay, about a third, maybe a half. Bing. People are like, I've heard of it. What about Gemini or Bard? Okay. Mistral. A couple Mistral folks in here. Barnabas. Okay. Notebook LM. All right. And Perplexity. Okay. So, variety of experience in the room, which in itself should mean you should be talking to one another and learning what other tools are out there. And of course, this is just a drop in the bucket. There feels like there's a bajillion tools coming out, never mind all the technologies we already have where AI just keeps popping up. But the thing is it feels so overwhelming because there's so much of it that you don't even know what to make sense of. So for instance, Barnabas is one I made up. And we would know that, but like there's so much that it's not just trying to learn about these tools, but it's trying to figure out like what's real, what's not. Never mind that this also impacts our reality, but it's also like, where do I even begin? And to that, I just say, like, you start small. You start with a tool. You try one tool or commit to one tool, figuring out the aspects and qualities of that. But one of the reasons generative AI has taken off and has been so powerful in the way it kind of has just swept through in the last 2 years is because it's a tool of a different nature. Now, prior to generative AI, we had Siri or Alexa, who would often mishear us, particularly depending on your identity, like your gender and your race. You would often not be heard or heard less or be seen less by AI. But these tools weren't all that great. They weren't. They were okay, but like most people found them to be subpar. We, with generative AI, see this very, very different, robust set of tools that create image and text and video. And yes, like a lot of them create things that are missing or have too many fingers, as we talked about. But also, like we do see leaps in their improvement in just the 2 years. But generative AI also does something that's very different from other technologies. We have been living in several years since the launch of the metaverse. And can anybody tell me in, 50 words or less, what the hell is the metaverse? Like, I'm serious, I'm trying to figure this out. Like, I've been like, right? Like, how do you get there, right? Is it like Sesame Street? Can like somebody tell me like how you get to Sesame Street? How do you get to the metaverse? How many people right now are being like, what is the metaverse? I haven't even heard this. Okay, a few people, right? Like this technology that like has spent billions of dollars was spent on and like supposedly exists and also nobody's really using it. How many people use the metaverse or go to the metaverse regularly? Okay, a handful of people. The bar to get to use the metaverse was so high that like many of us just don't have time for it. But what generative AI did, or the creators around generative AI, the thing that they did that has made it so ubiquitous is they took a really, really complex technology, doing really, really complex math, and they turned it into the most ubiquitous form of interaction on the internet. They turned it into a text box. And if you've been on the internet since the AOL days, all right, a few people know what I'm talking about. Great. Since IRC, since bulletin boards, like you know what to do with a text box, right? You put stuff into it and you hit send. Like we do this on our phone 100 times a day, and different whether we're texting or whatnot. So it took something very terribly complex and made it much simpler. And that's something that like we're reconciling with. This is some of what makes it so hard, is that it is now so readily available. And also, we're still trying to figure out all the ways that we can use it. Versus the metaverse, which there are things offered up for how to use it, but to try to get there, to try to like situate yourself in it, is so much more complex and hard. All right, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna kind of go forward with a little like, I'm gonna be doing some true and false questions. So I'll do a true and false question or two. We'll kind of unpack that. Then I'm gonna go into a particular type of use that you can think about using generative AI in your different types of work. And then we're gonna kind of have like a big usage tip. And we'll kind of cycle through that till the end of today. In everything that I'm talking about today, one of the things, if you were here at the beginning, the slides had a QR code and a link. Those will be there at the end of the slide deck as well. And on that QR code, it goes to a Google Doc that has, like 30 pages of prompts to try out in different categories, from like accessibility to student advising to rubric creation to administrative work to program planning, strategic planning. It's a whole set of prompts that you can go and try and figure out. But let's get started with the first question. Show of hands, if you think this is true. Generative AI, or generative artificial intelligence, may be becoming sentient. Show of hands. Anybody there yet? Oh, we got one or two. All right. By and large, it's not. And one of the things we have to be careful here, and we'll be challenged with this tool time and again, is that it's not thinking, right? But we're primed to think that it is. And we're primed to think that it is because, well, all those sci-fi movies and novels and comic books and TV shows and, well, Silicon Valley tech bros telling us that it's becoming sentient. Like we have millennia of storytelling about our objects becoming real. And it's hard not to. And it's particularly hard not to with a technology that mimics human language so well. And we can say, like, sometimes it's really bad, but, like, there's still lots of ways that it feels real. And so when it comes, with complex technologies, there's a lot of possibilities, but sentience in the immediate future isn't one. And so this is going to be hard for us to keep in our minds, and we have to keep it in our minds, not just for ourselves, but for our students and our staff, that this tendency to anthropomorphize technology, we've been doing this for thousands of years, and it has a name, and it's known as the ELIZA effect. Is anybody familiar with the ELIZA effect? So, okay, we've got a few, excellent. So the ELIZA effect came out of the 1960s, 1970s. In MIT, they had a program where they used coding to kind of instill a particular type of psychology response. And so what they had people doing was they were typing to ELIZA, that was the name of the computer program, and ELIZA would be giving a very programmed response, but a response that validated the person. So it would be somebody, ELIZA would ask, "How is your day going?" And the person would be saying, "I am having a bad day." And ELIZA would focus on, why are you having a bad day? And would just do that mimicry. And some people got really convinced that there's a ghost in the machine, or where is ELIZA? Is she in the other room, right? So that is something we have to work on, because there's going to be an increasing desire to inject meaning into AI. And what we have to always remember is the meaning is actually with us. Right? When it creates a poem, AI didn't create a poem. It's not a poem until, this is one of those, does a tree make a sound? Does a tree make a sound if it falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it? This is one of those areas where it's no, it doesn't make a sound until a human makes meaning of that. And that's what we have to hold in our minds about generative AI, and it's really hard to do. So I'm going to jump now to one of those categories that we're talking about. And I think this is important for us to go from it's not, it is not a human, it is a machine, and it's a machine or a set of tools that can help us do things more efficiently. Now, efficiency right now, because of lots of things going on at the national stage, has all sorts of problems or concerns for lots of different people. But I do think there is a lot of tedious work that we have to do that nobody wants to do. Right? There are things like minimizing tasks, which I think it's really good at. When I say nobody wants to do accessibility, I'm not saying nobody wants to do accessibility. I'm saying it's really hard to maintain that when you have to retrofit things on top of continue to produce new things. And so to me, there's a way that it can improve the amount of time on making things accessible that allows us to make more things accessible. It's adapting content. It's generating stuff that just takes human time and doesn't feel like it's useful. My favorite example for faculty everywhere I will save you lots of hours collectively every semester, which is a prompt where at the start of each semester, I go to start maybe 2 weeks before the semester, as I'm like finalizing my syllabi. I go to ChatGPT and I say, hey, give me all of the dates give me all of the Tuesdays between the start of the semester and the end of the semester, and any holidays that are happening and when they're happening. I can take this prompt every time, change out the dates, and within 30 seconds, I get all of those dates. And I have spent many, many semesters toggling between my syllabus and a calendar back and forth. I can see from some of the smiles that I'm not the only one. And I know some folks are now gonna go use this. Like, this to me is one of those, this makes me more efficient because my time, institution's time, is not spent well by me fishing dates every semester. It's just not. So great, I'm gonna use it in that capacity. And then this was the second prompt that gave the holidays. So this is one of the most important ways I've been thinking about in using AI, and if you're lost, you're not sure what to do, or you want to improve how you might be, say, prompting, this is one of my favorites. The very first prompt when I'm trying to get a good response out of generative AI is to go to it and say, hey, revise the following prompt to maximize the output of a large language model, and then I put in the prompt. And what happens there is it gives me a much better prompt at getting information out of the AI. So it's kind of meta, right? It's kind of whoa, I am asking you to tell me how to ask you better questions, right? And it can work. So here is this example of the prompt on the left is what I started with, and I said, hey, ChatGPT, improve this prompt. And on the left gave me that new prompt that now I feed into the AI. Now, one of the things that's really valuable about this is it reduces the amount of questions I'm gonna ask. Because no matter what, my first question is gonna be pretty limiting, or I'm not gonna necessarily know all the things. And so if it can get me quicker, it can get me to a response quicker, it's really helpful. It also helps me understand how the tool works, right? If I'm saying improve this, and this is what it comes out with, I start to build a better understanding of what makes a good prompt. All right, now the true and false. AI is similar to human thinking when it arrives at its answer. True. Raise your hand if that's true. Love it. It's like crickets. Almost nobody is buying this. That's right, it's false. Generative AI doesn't think like you or I do. First of all, we all think differently. This is why we talk about neurodiversity, right? My mind is still blown away. And I learned this 3 or 4 years ago of, there are people like myself who have an ongoing running train of thought in their heads. There's a voice, there's an interior Lance voice. In other people, that's not the case. And I'm just I don't get it, right? Those are different ways of thinking or experiencing the world. And so that's one way we need to think about it. And it's also a way we have to think about it is our mind is composed of whole things. It's composed of whether it's images or thoughts or sounds. When we think about a table, whatever kind of table we're thinking about a table. And this is where it's different from what AI does. So when we're talking about generative AI and understanding it from that technical perspective, and this is as technical as I'm gonna get, I promise, is the way generative AI works is it has trained this large language model, this vast collection of text. And by trained, I mean it has basically mathed the hell, and that's a technical term, mathed the hell out of the relationships across that large corpus of text. And not the relationships of words, of whole things, but of what it calls tokens. And tokens are 4 or 5 characters of text. So if the word was character, a token is only going to be C-H-A-R, maybe the second A. Right? It's only going to be a part of that word. So it mathematically maps out all of those relationships. to understand and anticipate, like, when you see these 4 characters, what are the next 4 characters that show up? And so what happens is when you go to a generative AI tool and you put in your prompt, all it's doing is mathing. It's looking at the prompt, and it's mathematically connecting all the words in your prompt to how it has composed relationships in that large language model. That's like the basic idea of what generative AI does. And like, that is just not how we think. We don't think in bits and pieces of words, right? We have inherent understandings or relationships with the objects that are in our head as we're thinking. Objects, emotions, feelings, like those are things in our head that we hold as whole versus just bits and pieces of words. But it can be a really good brainstorming tool. And it's a good brainstorming tool because it's, again, about our injecting or our taking meaning out of it. So for brainstorming, right, it can generate different activities for learning. You can use it for planning, for concept mapping, for self-assessment. We're a few months away from June. I know in many places that's like annual evaluation time, and of course, like, we always have to do that dreaded self-evaluation. And like, here's an opportunity to like use a tool to help you figure out like, what exactly do I want to own or say about my progress this year. So again, I'm going to offer up another example. A lot of text here. You don't have to read it. This is, again, just you'll find these prompts in the resource document that you'll be able to access at the end. But basically, in this prompt, I'm telling generative AI that they're an expert in educational development, and lots of experiences with faculty at a particular type of university, and in thinking about their pedagogical approaches. And I'm telling the AI, I want them to help a faculty member update their small business in the law course using service learning. And I ask it, provide 3 substantial but manageable service learning projects that could be completed in 4 weeks. In designing these projects, make sure they align with one of my course outcomes. Right? So I'm giving it kind of this like, here's what I'm looking for. And I'm not looking for it to do it, I'm not looking for it to give me the best answer, but to give me 3 answers so that I can look at and think about and see if there's anything there that I can borrow. And so again, 30 seconds or less, I end up with, this is the first of several, but it gives me one of like, oh, do a trademark search and consultation for local businesses. That could actually be a really cool service learning project, right? And then it starts to give me like, here's what the outline could be, here's what the alignment could be, and I could keep asking further questions of it to get more answers in return, or to get more ideas in return. And so this is one of the things that I've found with AI that's really powerful and helpful for me is both as a brainstormer in how I use it. I like thinking about it as flipping the script. How many people go to AI just to get answers? Okay, people raise their hand. Nobody, sometimes people are like, I don't want to admit it. Like, I do. I certainly do. Like, you go there to get answers. But one of the most powerful ways we can use it, we can have our students use it, is to help them use it, to help them and help us understand what we already know. So I use it a lot to interview me, to ask me questions on projects that I'm working on, right? So this is the thing that I like about it is we all have had the experience of the perpetual question asker, right? The person who's like, why? And there's a place for that. And also, sometimes there's a place where I need that, but they're not around. So here's an opportunity where I can do some reflection, I can do some ideating, and I'm not like leaning on the tool to come up with things, but I'm using the tool to help me draw out what I already know, to draw out what are my ideas, what is the work that I'm doing. And that is in here, and I want to make connections with, but sometimes, like, even though I have that internal monologue, I often also need to like talk things out. I need to like exercise the demons or the ideas that are in my head to make those connections. So this is one of those tips that I think is really powerful in changing how I've used it and how a lot of other people have used it. I've also used this in class as providing a prompt for students to do reflection. Because here's the thing, is like reflection is such a powerful, powerful tool for learning. But it's also a practice that if you're early in your reflection practice, you're going to have often more superficial responses. So, the students might say something like, in their reflection, I didn't like it. I want to know why. Like, I want them to dig into that. But I'm not going to hear I didn't like it until they submit it. And at that point, like, we may have lost a week of time. Versus when they're doing the reflecting, having a tool like this to dig into that, it's actually really cool, right? And so I have students submit their chat logs because they're doing the reflection in dialogue with a tool that just keeps probing what they're saying to get more response out of them. So here's an example of this. On the left is like, here might be a prompt I would do previously, which is provide a communication plan for an HR team about how we engage staff and faculty across community college over the spring. Versus on the right, I'm telling it, like, I'm trying to do a communication plan. I want you to interview me to get a comprehensive understanding of what we have done, what has worked, what is feasible for the size of the team. Like, I can then, with the AI, start to build out a much clearer understanding of what that is that I'm working towards. And for me, like, there's efficiency here, but there's also just, like, getting to ask those questions that I'm not going to think of, or that gets me going in directions that I find have been really helpful in all of this. All right, one of my favorite questions. Generative artificial intelligence can lie. Raise your hand if that is true. Yeah, right? This is a tricky one. This one gets a lot of whispers. It doesn't lie. Anybody want to take a crack at why it doesn't lie? Because it doesn't know it's lying, because there's not intention there. So I'm so glad you said that. It hallucinates, right? We have that language of it hallucinates. It lies. Both of those are very human things, right? Lying comes with intention, and hallucination is language that we have been using for people that have mental health challenges, right? And so it's really interesting that we use that same language for a machine, for a program. So this is what I mean about that ELIZA effect. What does it mean that we're using language of lying in hallucinations around something that's doing math? Right? This is what we have to be careful about for ourselves and for our students. I've seen moments where students feel extremely validated by what an AI has said, and like have to walk with that student to help that, like, walk them through understanding they need to be and should be validated. And also that validation that's happening is in themselves, and it is not in the AI. Right? And these are things we have to think about, is our relationships with these tools. We want to use them, but we want to walk that line. So while it doesn't lie, you absolutely shouldn't trust it, because it's calculating, it's probability of this is probably the right response. And we don't want to leave ourselves to keep believing that, because if we're thinking about it hallucinating, we're thinking about, oh, well, maybe that will get better. We're not thinking about what it is that it actually does. All right, speaking of lying, content generation, which is something we are absolutely concerned and should be around how these tools are misappropriately used. But again, there are values within this of, I left a link in there sorry about that. So content generation includes, creating outlines, starts of strategic projects, assignments, rubrics. One of my favorites is student examples. Now, how many of us have gone to a student and said, your work was amazing, I would love to use it as an exemplar for future learning? How many people have done that? Absolutely, time-honored tradition, right? We love that. There's something super validating about that. And this isn't what I'm talking about. Like, I'm not taking away from that. Because good examples are great, but we're never, ever, 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 and nor should we, go to a student and say, your assignment was so horrible, I would love to use it for a bad example. Not gonna happen, nor should it, right? Like, not a good situation. But we do need bad examples. And so a way I've been doing this, particularly around things like discussions or like smaller assignments, is like, create a bad student example so that students can understand, like, not just what's aspirational, but like where they want to avoid, or if they are showing up in a, if they're looking more like this, they'll want to put in more effort, or to understand where their output is going to, what level their output is going to be evaluated at. So here again, we have another example. Assume the role of a strategic advisor for a community college located in Massachusetts. Sounds very, very fitting. Tasked with transforming the college into a leading regional hub for biotech education and training. And so your goal is to identify and detail a variety of strategies, not only that are not only effective and financially viable, but can also be implemented promptly to achieve this transformation. And then I say your strategies should aim to position the college as a beacon of biotech in research, fostering innovation, and contributing significantly to the regional biotech ecosystem. And so here's what I give it, and here's where it starts to give a response. And it gives, this was a snapshot of the entire plan, but it's saying, develop employee advisory boards, launch paid biotech apprenticeships, embed industry certifications into curricula. Now, I'm not going to say whether this is great quality or not. There would be more that I would want to put into that prompt, like specific things about that particular college or already existing strategic plans and stuff. But this is the way that, for me, like that content creation, that idea of like, let me help or start to build something, let me get past the white, the blank white screen. Now, I say this as somebody who I have been a professional, I can say this, I've been a professional writer for over 20 years. And also, the blank screen terrifies me, right? Like, I need something to get me going. I've been using this as a start, or in certain things, to be clear. A lot of my writing, I still write, but on things that are like this, reports and plans that like, they have a structure. They have certain maneuvers that like, I know I can do, and I'd rather be in the editing role than just like starting to put all of it onto into that document. I've found it to be a really good, useful way of doing it. But there's another way that I've really been playing with generative AI that I talked a little bit about how I get it to interview me. For a lot of my writing now, I actually do something very, very different. I will take out my phone. I happen to use the paid version of ChatGPT, which has the voice option. And what I will do is I will give it a prompt to interview me around something that I'm writing. And it will start to ask questions verbally. I will respond verbally. And we will go back and forth like this. I'll do this on drives. I'll do this on walks. I'll do this like in lots of different places when I also don't want to just be staring at a screen, or I want to be somewhere else. I want to be moving, etc. So I will do that. We'll go back and forth, and this may go on for like a good chunk of 20, 30 minutes. And then when I go back to the computer, everything that I said is now in text. And now I have like the ability to start to move into forming whatever that output is. And so for me, again, it's not replacing the work that I'm doing. It's finding another way of working that is really helpful for me, and also like I spend enough of my time on screens. Like it gets me a little bit away. It gets me into other places that I might even be more creative or like be able to dig in that like I just might not be when sitting at a desk. Sure. So the question is, can you explain how you get into that? So on ChatGPT, there is a voice tool where it will talk to you, and also like you can talk back to it. And what I will end up doing is I will tell it to interview me around, I'm writing a post on my Substack about X, and it's for this particular community, and I want you to ask me questions that lead me or focus on Z. So like I'll give it that prompt, it'll hear it, and then it'll ask its first question. And then I will talk back and forth, and that whole conversation is happening on my phone, but then I can go back onto, like, into a computer, into that chat log, and like everything that I said has now been turned to text, so I can just copy and paste that into the document or the post or wherever it is that I'm working. Does that help? Awesome. All right, true or false, generative AI will take all of our jobs. Show of hands if you think this is true. All right. People are like, I don't know if it's listening, so I don't want to give it away. It's fine, it's fine, I get it, no judgment, right? Right, it's false, but it is gonna disrupt and augment our work. And part of the challenge of us at a college is to really stay abreast of it and understand how it's going to impact our areas of work. Any knowledge worker is going to have to consider and contend with how these tools amplify their work and in some places replace it. Like there will be jobs that disappear. That has been, every technology has that happen. It's the question of how does this work for my field? And this is something really important everywhere, because one of the things I've seen in the last 2 years, like part of what I'm doing here, there's some great general moves and frameworks that you can be thinking about, but where you really need to be looking at this point to figure out AI is in your disciplines, in your fields, in your industries, because the best thing we can compare this to help make sense of it is the internet. We can now say 30 years later, like the internet has changed every industry, every field. There is no industry or field that is not doing something different as a result of the internet, right? All of them have changed in different ways, right? You can be a historian and not have to travel the globe, right? That was a thing that you can get access to archives, and now you have to think differently about digital archives and all of that. So we know the internet changed everything. And so what we really need people to do is this, and it's not easy, I'm not like, oh, this is all we have to do, but it is this challenge of what does this tool mean for my field or industry? How is it going to be used? And that's one part of the conversation. And then the other part of the conversation is, then what do we need to hold on to in our teaching and learning? And where do we lean on these tools or lean away from these tools in our teaching, right? In our learning. And those are gonna be things that we're gonna be grappling with for the next few years, but they have to happen at that discipline or that field or that industry level. So another way that I've been using and I've been finding it really helpful is around data and info processing. And of course, within that, it's doing things like analyzing research, qualitative and quantitative data, reviewing and summarizing documents, right? Show of hands, how many of us have, I don't know, a folder or an ungodly amount of bookmarks of those PDFs or articles that you're gonna read? Show of hands? All right, good. People are raising proudly, right? They're like, I've got 790 articles. I'm gonna read them someday, right? I'm definitely gonna read them someday. We've all been there. I mean, I won't talk about how many I have across how many Google folders and the like, but realistically, we're not gonna get to those. But I do know that if there's something I need to get more quickly to, I can use this as a first go. I can use this as a way of okay, can I get more of the gist? Because abstracts aren't usually that. They're but can I get more information more specifically about why I'm interested in that article? So we can use this around these types of ways to get into something, even if we don't want to fully commit to it. And let me be clear, I'm not saying we should read less. That sometimes is the other side of this. I'm a full, I teach literature. I'm never not gonna say we shouldn't be fully developed, fully into reading and fully into writing, but it doesn't mean we have to read everything, right? There's lots of things that we just don't have to read, or getting the summation is good enough for what we're going to use it for. All right, so another prompt here is one that I've used at my previous institution where we do anonymous surveys every 4 weeks, which means we are getting hundreds of surveys every 4 weeks. That is often more qualitative data. And as a person that was running the LMS and doing faculty support and 3 other jobs, I'm not going to be able to spend hours going through that data every 4 weeks. And so started to use a prompt like this where I was interested in reports about faculty usage of our learning management system. And I was interested in them thinking about how can I use this to support faculty? How can I use this to make sense of where the challenges are so I can more quickly deploy resources? So this will happen in week 4 of the semester, in week 8 of the semester, and I can have feedback to faculty by the middle of week 5, things they can actually act on. So it would give me a response okay, here's an example, effective use of Moodle's communication tools. It pulled some exact quotes, and then recommendations for actions. And I can use those things to move, to reach out to faculty as a whole and support them. Or in other contexts, again, you get that that qualitative feedback that can help you understand the story that's happening. And I can tell you, there are concerns about how well or how not well generative AI quotes or cites, and those things are changing. Some of the more recent models, and you can see those. You can look at a tool like Perplexity, which actually uses the internet itself and gives you the sources as it finds them. So we want to be mindful about the AI as a tool is also changing. All right, so this is another way of working with that challenge of AI, which is when somebody asks me, after I've done something, created something, what did you miss? I mean, of course my answer is nothing. It was absolutely perfect, right? That's what we always, right? But not joking aside, it's really hard for me in the moment to be able to pick apart something that I did. If I take time away, I certainly can. But this is one of the areas that AI is really different. You can put in something, and you can say, okay, what did you miss? And it'll give you a list of what's missing in that response. You can, and I've seen this done, somebody was showing this to me this week. I haven't done it yet, but I will start doing this as well, is you can also ask it, what is its bias, or what is it, how is what they just shared biased? And again, it's not perfect. It's going to absolutely miss things, and also it's going to spot things, and it's going to catch things that I would just have missed. So I think there's something really powerful about being able to ask a tool what it just did and how to improve it. To me, that's a really cool thing or feature that for us as humans is incredibly hard to do for lots of different reasons. So here's this example where I asked it to follow up with that question. I followed that question of tell me everything that's wrong, and this is in response to that biotech strategic plan. And it just kind of gave a list of things of oh, it didn't consider X, it didn't consider Y. And thinking about useful information to move forward that didn't require me going out and scouring even further. Still gonna end up doing that, but where I have to put that spotlight of attention feels much more targeted than where it was before. All right. True or false? Generative AI only has information since 2022 when it was released. Raise your hand if it's true. Nobody's buying it. Good. Right? All of these have been false. Spoiler alert. One of the things we have to contend with, and this is also one of the challenges we're navigating, is that we are navigating this dynamic of there's lots of different models out there. There's different tools, and each tool has different models. And so we ourselves have to kind of continually keep in mind what tools we're using and what within those tools are the different models. Because when you look at a tool like ChatGPT, it now has 4 or 5 different models that you can customize to. So what does that mean, right? Models, that feels a little complicated. Think of it like this, is we now have different, if you think about generative AI tools like web browsers, right? You've got your Firefox, your Google, your Safari. But then within each of those, you have different features. You have different extensions that you can add or that like will change how you interact with the browser. That's getting very similar with generative AI, is thinking about what are the different specific tools, and then what are the different features that come with each of them. And those features in those models are updated at different points. So Perplexity, as I mentioned, surfs the web live, right? So the recency there, and that's why when I want to use AI around things that are recent, I'm gonna go to Perplexity. When I want something that isn't touching the internet at all, I'm gonna use Claude. But like starting to learn and understand some of those differences. All right. Communication. Of course, this is one of these areas where like we're seeing a lot of stuff created with generative AI for communication, and it feels meh. But really, again, looking at using it as a tool for editing text, for revising, for reviewing others' communications for tone and clarity. I know I appreciate this one because I don't know about anybody here, but I can occasionally read an email, and I don't know, I might start to do that death spiral of like, worrying about the things that are like 5 levels beyond what that email was actually about. And I can get there pretty quick. I can get there like 10 minutes, being like, oh my God, is my job in danger, just by an email saying, hey, when do you think you'll have this report? All right, I'm not the only one again, right? So like using it to make sense of others' communication, improving my own communication. People that know me, particularly when it comes to writing, I am very wordy. And I know this about myself, and I am okay with this around the things that I publish, but I'm wordy, and like in certain contexts, that's not helpful. So I will often use it to help with preciseness, rather than doing the painstaking work that I can do, but is also going to take like 2 hours. There's that, I think, also a very similar quote that may have been attributed to Mark Twain of like, if you need me to do something along the lines of like, if you need me to do a 10-minute talk, I need 2 weeks. If you need me to do a 2-hour talk, I'll be there in 5 minutes, right? Like, there's a dynamic to me in that in writing, and where this tool is really helpful. So here again, here's an example of how I might use it. And let me be clear. I know I can answer an email like this on my own fairly well. And also, when I've gotten the 5th email like this that day, or if it's at the end of the day or later in the semester, my knee-jerk reaction, like, I should not be sending those emails. And if I need something to just get me out of that, it's doing something like this. So in this prompt, I'm saying you're a motivational communications, and you're an expert in motivational communications and student success. Analyze this email from the student. Provide me with 3 different interpretations grounded in scholarship that can help me consider what might be going on and how to respond effectively in a way that acknowledges what it should say might be missing, but also respectfully helps the student understand their communication might be lacking or hard to understand. And so the message that the student sends, and hey, didn't do the homework, don't have the textbook, too much, also couldn't make it to class last week, LOL, what'd I miss? Is this email sitting in anybody's inbox right now? You don't have to raise your hand, right? So again, I can do that and very quickly get this good, clear sense of like, okay, here are some things to consider. Here are some ways to just make sense of it and not let it overwhelm or override, or let your less kinder self be overridden, and come up with, and it even provides an example response that I can start to use or adapt. And again, not saying like, I can't do this, but there's times when I could use a little help in getting there. It's times I could use language to get there. Like, I need other language to get there. So, and we talked about this a few other times, is just that like it's really helpful to ask it for several different answers, several different takes, to get different perspectives or different ways of going forward. I think this is one of the last Q&A, true or false. Generative AI detectors can determine if something was created with generative AI. Raise your hand for true. Good. Oh, This is largely false. And we have to go back to remembering a generative AI detector is detecting probability. And one of the biggest, like, if you think about old Turnitin before generative AI could say, hey, here's your paper, and these highlighted texts look exactly like these highlighted texts that we know have been published a time before. With generative AI detectors, it's saying, based on our calculations of the pattern of your writing, this text, based on our models of generative AI, keeping in mind, is this percentage likely to be created by generative AI? So there's lots of ifs, ands, buts going into that. Never mind the fact that it has no source proof, right? So if you are a student, how do you defend against an accusation where there is no evidence? It's only probability. There's no source. And particularly at a place at a community college, particularly when these types of tools create more false positives for English language learners, that's a really tricky situation because, yeah, going to a student and saying, this machine said you did otherwise, and you have to defend yourself, potentially defend yourself in a different language around a technology that none of us really have a good fundamental understanding of on the back end, that's a problem. And this is not to say we can't use these at all. I'm certainly not comfortable using them yet, but I think there's a lot to be said about exactly where we're going to use them, in how, what kind of measures are there to protect the students? Because you want to kill a student's energy and excitement for teaching and learning, or for learning, falsely accuse them of doing something when they've actually done a lot of work. That's just kind of that ends education for folks. All right, a couple last things. Avoidance isn't a strategy, right? Abstinence did not work for prohibition. It did not work for the war on drugs. Newsflash, drugs won, right? It did not work. It does not work. And so it's really thinking about how do we use these. It doesn't mean you have to be all full in with AI. You should be skeptical. You should have guardrails. But to say it has no place, to say you're going to be banished or all these things if you use it in this class, we're missing opportunities where it can actually do some really interesting things. I'll share one more story around this. I had a student in a class that AI was the focus in AI in education. And she came in sharing the story where she was like, I took AI and I used it to organize my notes. Long story short, by using AI to organize her notes, it got her to write the paper a week sooner, which meant she got it in earlier, she got in the draft, she got feedback, she got an A. In contrast to, she would put off organizing her notes till the night before, scramble to try to pass in a half-assed paper, and hope she passed. Now this was a 30-something-year-old woman. She knows herself. She is not a person who organized her notes. We can lean into well, she should do that, right? But if we know ourselves and we know where our strengths are, this was the hurdle to her doing really good work. And once she was able to use a tool to help her get past that, she's been doing great work. And so to me, there's a really interesting question of where are those opportunities? There's dangers, but there's also lots of opportunities there. We need two buckets in using generative AI. We need and this is the value added for education, which is we need deep knowledge about generative AI, right? We need to know how it works and understand how it works, but we also need deep knowledge of the thing that we're asking generative AI to use. We need that disciplinary knowledge. We need that field knowledge because it's only with that generative AI can be useful. And this is what we have to stress to our colleagues, our staff, our students, that these two things go hand in hand. They're not separate. You only know if it's a mediocre answer if you understand it enough to know that it's a mediocre answer. And then no matter where you stand with generative AI, you absolutely can hate it and say never, or I'm never going to use it in my classrooms in particular ways, but you need to find a way that it's useful to you. Doesn't mean you have to use it. But understanding how it can be life-changing, how it can be validating, how it can be really powerful for people is really important, because getting to that space helps you understand there may not be space for it in your class, but you can understand why people are using it. And from there, a lot more things can happen. And finally, as I said earlier, like, the only way we figure this out is actually being human, is actually together, is creating communities of practice, sharing what we're learning, helping learn from others. Like, most of everything I know about AI, I learned from other people. I learned from engaging and sharing what I'm doing, hearing what they're doing, figuring out different prompts or different ways to interact with it, to elicit information, to apply it. Like, all of those things come from a community, come from working and learning with others. And with that, I know I went a little bit over, but thank you all very much.